Hello, Lakshmi.
Hello.
And hello, everyone else. I am Swami Asha, and this is Lakshmi Lapine, and we are here chatting conversations with Asha, Millennials Speak. And we have one. We have one here, just going to speak. Lakshmi, this is our third, I think this is our third conversation, isn't it? Yes, these are what we're doing right now, and maybe even for another month beyond, as we're talking to five of the wonderful third generation of Ananda. I call them the third, Swami the first. My tribe is the second, they're the third. Millennial age group who are essentially rising into leadership positions within Ananda, and I thought it would be nice for all of us to get to know each other better. So, Lakshmi, I'm going to ask you just a really simple question, and it's like, what does it mean to you to be a disciple? Before you answer that question, remind me, because even though I know you better than some, exactly how and when did you? I know you told the story in one of these interviews about how you found Ananda and so on, but how exactly when did you decide to become a disciple, and what was what was the tipping point for you in taking initiation and taking Kriya?
Well, I came to Ananda in October of 2012, and as I've mentioned once before, especially at that time in my life, I was a timid soul by nature, or I guess I should say a timid person by nature, because the soul is not timid. Um, but when I came in, the first time that I entered the church was for a Sunday service, and in the announcements that week, there was an announcement that a Med One series was starting
Which means
that Thursday.
meditation one, med one,
Yes.
yes, meditation one. Okay, uh-huh.
And it felt just simple and right, like the door was just wide open to take that meditation course. And this was when the structure in Ananda Palawata was a little different. You went from meditation 1 to meditation 2, 3, 4, all the way up through 6. And I like to describe it as I sort of caught the train. I had no intention of becoming um, I didn't even know what it would mean to become a disciple when I first walked in the door. But because I was able to walk that path from meditation 1 to meditation 2 and 3 and so on, and learn along the way what it meant to merge your consciousness with a higher power, a source, and to really understand and discover your own source of power, it felt natural by the time that about 4 months later that I was offered an opportunity to take discipleship. I knew it by that point that Yogananda was the driving force in my life, and that no matter where I would go or what I would do, that he would be that pole star for me, the source that I could orient myself to.
So Ananda and Yogananda were synchronistic, but not necessarily exactly the same thing in your mind. Were you thinking of it that way?
Yes, I think when I first entered into the church and came to Ananda, and we talked about this briefly, what I was attracted to was the spirit of the people and the authenticity of joy that was present in that spirit. And but I didn't know until months later that that was actually tethered to discipleship, that the source of that joy comes from not only seeking within, but understanding and attuning to a source of power that's driving force, and that sole purpose in this world is to bring us home, bring us back to that place of oneness. But through my meditation courses and the teachers I encountered along the way, that relationship developed, and I understood that apart from Ananda is the vehicle through which I can relate to and connect to my guru, to Yogananda. So both are essential elements in my life, but discipleship is the orientation that I feel to master, and the guidance that I feel from and through that master being Paramahansa Yogananda.
Well, of course, Master left his body in 1952, which was long before you took form yourself. So, um, I mean, it may be self-evident to you, but can you put it into words how you can have a relationship with someone you've never met?
Hmm. I'm one of the few in this millennial generation of rising leaders, as you've described it. I also never had the opportunity to meet Swami Kriyananda or even be in the same room as him, and I often have introspected on that and what my karma is in that relationship. And I think that for me, there's a power, because of my proclivity, there's a power in never knowing the form, both of Swami Kriyananda, whom I consider to be a deep teacher, and Yogananda, whom I consider to be my guru, because the form is, it's a relationship that you have with something that is external in this world, something that you're pouring your energy into. Whereas the formless, when we can go deep into meditation and feel those places of inner guidance and those places of introspection, that source of energy and that guidance is in fact attunement to the guru. And so by looking at and forming a relationship with the guru through the formless state, he becomes ever present in our lives. And so I think in certain ways there's a power that's so, I guess I would say that for me, that was necessary. I would feel so attached to the form. Even of Swami Kriyananda, this is how I felt in my introspection on why I was never able to meet him or be in the same room as him. The form and the matter and the person that was Swami Kriyananda is one brief speck of the energy that is Swami Kriyananda, or for that matter of Master, who is merged with cosmic consciousness. And so relating to the formless is in fact a way to expand our hearts.
No, I have a theory about, I mean, an obvious theory. The work of an avatar like Yogananda, it gets launched in his lifetime. It barely gets going. Swami Kriyananda's had the karma in multiple lifetimes, multiple incarnations of Master to be a son generationally, and then carry forth the project. Basically, bring it into order. That's what he did when he was his son in England, and this is what he did here. He sort of, Swami Kriyananda's created a whole culture of self-realization, which is what Ananda represents, from what Master taught. But that work is just beginning, and therefore most of it will happen long after they're passed. So it seems to me that it's necessary for, first of all, it's self-evident, but let me think what I'm trying to say is, what's needed now in this transition time is examples of people who can be in tune without the ever having met. Mm-hmm. Because my experience is over for everyone. I mean, I'm interesting, but I'm not an example. So I even though you're concerned about attachment and form may well have some validity, I think there's a simpler explanation, which is you have to show that it's possible to be completely dedicated without that ever happening. Is that fair? Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think it is fair. You know, as you were speaking, the thought came into my mind that I think I can say it more eloquently than I did before. The attunement to the guru and the teacher is a state of consciousness and an idea that we are always seeking and driving forth, and that we, as you're saying, have a responsibility to carry forth as disciples. And so when we can attune ourselves to that wave of consciousness, to that idea that is ever extending outward, and leave the forms behind us, then we, in the work, in the creativity, and everything that we're doing in service to the guru, we get to expand ever outward with that. And that attunement, you know, those ideas, those seeds of consciousness that we can attach ourselves to, they're just as real as the tangible flesh and blood of the guru or the teacher.
In some ways more real, because I mean, what you say is also true, because Swami Kriyananda often said to us that we were fortunate never to have met Master, because he said for him it was quite confusing that he was in the presence of God himself, and then God himself was dictating a letter and having dinner in the room next door. He said sometimes his mind just would bend and he didn't know which way to go with it. So he said sometimes it's better that you didn't. So he endorsed that thought. It's better that there was no form, because then you just go with the energy. So how did becoming a disciple change your life?
You know, it took me.
Or how has it changed your life? Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I've been on this path for the better part of 10 years, and for the last 7 of those have been a disciple. And I would say that the definition of what it means to be a disciple is ever evolving. It's the lotus flower that's just continually opening up, to use that image. But it took me, I think, 3 or 4 years into really being a disciple and practicing that discipleship to recognize what it means and how it's changed my life. I lived in, and I've mentioned this once before, that I have two parts of my life. I have Ananda and the world that I live here, and then I had my professional life. And it really wasn't until about 6 years ago that I learned to merge those two. I was keeping them dualistic, that I could go out into the world and be a teacher, and then come home and be a disciple, and meditate and practice my connection, my attunement to that spirituality. But through deeper and deeper meditations, through studying, through practicing the presence of God in every moment, I've learned what it means to merge those together. And now what discipleship looks like is it's being a carrier of these teachings and spreading them in the world in every moment, whether you're using the verbiage of this path or you're using the vibration of this path. The being a disciple is kind of like Johnny Appleseed. You're walking around and sowing the seeds of love, of friendship, of compassion, and it's that's what I find myself doing in my day-to-day life.
Do you ever feel frustrated you're a high school teacher and a counselor, or what you are, a conflict resolver. Is that what you described your job, that you're conflict resolution counselor?
Yes.
Is that the right phrase for it?
Yeah, conflict resolution or conflict mediation.
So tell me, actually, because I don't really know, what does that look like in a high school, in a public high school? Tell me what happens. I mean, when they're about to punch each other out, are they dragged to you? Is that how it comes, or how does it work?
Actually, no. That's what a lot of people think.
Yeah.
But when students are in the midst of, or are really heated and agitated, when they're in that emotional state, I don't see them. So that's when they'll be dealing with perhaps the discipline side of it. And then days later, they would come to me. And I meet with each student individually as many times as is needed to help them get to a place of the root of conflict mediation is an understanding and an ability to acknowledge an empathetic perspective. Whether the student is actually able to say I was wrong is different from being able to acknowledge I can understand the state of mind or the emotional state that the other student was in. So I work with them each individually and counsel them however is needed until we can get to a point to come together and have those conversations and look at acknowledging what could have been done differently individually, what they need from the other student in the future, and we move forward through that process of empathy building.
My experience of public education is that you're forbidden to introduce a religious motif. Is that true?
It is true.
So you
Yeah.
can't really speak. Can you speak of a greater reality? Can you speak of harmony? Or can you just, anything that even hints at God, can you not do it?
Mhm.
How does that work?
No, actually, and that's where I have found the tools of this path and the verbiage. You can see how and why Paramahansa Yogananda is the avatar for this age, because he speaks beyond the religious aspect, beyond the religious verbiage. And so when you talk about harmony, compassion, when you talk about the 8 aspects of God, power, love, wisdom, joy, these are all emotions that we can discuss in any sort of secular setting. And so we have that opportunity to really talk about what the essence of the spiritual path is asking us to do, but I don't have to introduce God into the conversation. I always start with my students. I have a couple of repeat offenders who come in often, and they'll say to me, they call me Miss Lapine, they'll say, Miss Lapine, I'm not breathing today, and so I always say, let's start with a couple deep breaths, let's close our eyes. But they'll come in and they'll say, don't ask me to breathe today, and I'll say, all right.
I mean, they're rebelling. They're saying, I'm too mad to breathe. I
Exactly.
remember when I was dealing with a lot of emotions and I tried to deal with it by walking vigorously and making myself breathe. I remember trying to stop crying by making myself walk vigorously. And I realized that I could stop myself from crying, but I wanted to cry. So I stopped walking vigorously and breathing deeply because I wanted to be upset, and it was interrupting my power to be upset.
Yep. Yeah.
So tell me what the main tools are that you're able to carry into a secular setting. I mean, you mentioned it a little bit, but be more systematic. How have you strategized this over the years?
The first step is to ask the student to acknowledge the other person's perspective. And so that's where we'll take into account, can you understand what happiness might look like for the other person? Can you understand what harm might look like for the other person? And so I would look at that in terms of yogic speak, as we're asking them to expand their consciousness to tap into that mass consciousness, that shared unity of the human experience. Because oftentimes, there are repeat themes that come back. It's either a lack of respect, it's anger that's misplaced and being manifested on another person, or it's cultural. These are a lot of the reasons that students end up in conflict. So there are students who are taught a culture of conflict or a culture of violence,
So
power.
it's cultural. You mean
Mm-hmm.
a violent response, reactive response is basically what they think of as normal. Is that what you mean by cultural?
Exactly.
A culture. You don't mean like racial or ethnic when you're saying that, although that could play into it. But yeah, it's not. It's more just this is how we live. This is normal life.
Exactly. Yes, it's about, if for a lot of students and for a lot of people in general, especially if we're looking at minorities whose voices have been oppressed over the generations, power and control has to be taken by force. And so when you need something, you have to be powerful and stronger than the person in front of you in order to get what you need at times. And so again, I think that's what I mean. It's the cultural in that perspective that, yeah, it's been taught, and it's a common theme or habit that's been habituated over time.
What you just said there, power and control have to be taken by force. I mean, a lot of people who operate with much more subtle forms of energy are actually still just reacting with that same basic thing. Isn't that so? Isn't that every time you say an unkind word or react, it's like power and control have to be taken by force. That's a very good phrase. How how successful are you? I mean, I think you're well regarded in your field. So you haven't finished, but let's actually let me let you finish first because it's very interesting what you're saying. I was asking you what the basic guidelines are that you've been able to translate over. You were saying getting them to think about another person's reality. What would happiness look like? What does harm look like for that
Mm-hmm.
other person?
Yeah.
This
And
is the basic education for life principle: learning to relate to realities other than your own.
mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where I was ultimately headed with it, is that the strategies that I use in the mediation space in the office that I have are grounded in education for life. Sometimes it's difficult to apply those in the larger teaching because I also am in the classroom for part of my day, where you're not dealing with direct conflict, but you are dealing with a group of 30 plus students. And so it can be hard to have those one-on-one moments to touch in and feel the soul and identify what the soul needs. But in the mediation room, where there's one or maybe two of you, it's much easier to access that and to ask students to look at that, to look at their own perspectives. When we were talking to take by force, in order to earn power and control, what we know the opposite of that from a yogic standpoint, we know the power and the strength that I have is not my own, that it comes from a source that flows through me. And so when we can stop in the mediation room, when I can stop and ask a student that, what were you needing in that moment? And then let's say it was respect, power, control, whatever it may be. How are there other ways in your life that you can access that? So what we're actually doing, or what I'm actually trying to do in the mediation space, is plant seeds. So to come to that question, how successful, it's a give and a take, because it is ultimately a punitive based system. So sometimes they're coming and they're agreeing to a mediation because it's a means to an end. But where I find the most joy in my work is acknowledging that these are seeds that are being planted, just like we plant the seeds, in our own spine in a yogic standpoint, and they can come back to that someday and look, well, I needed power and I used force to get it. But where can that power come from? Where are other sources of power in my life that are more uplifting?
But that's very positive. So how does being a disciple, how do you live out your discipleship in the mediation room, as you're calling it? I
Mhm.
mean, is it a conscious thing? Just give me some idea of how you work with them.
Mhm. It has become a conscious practice for me. When I think about discipleship, as just imagining, the way the word I would use is, for me, discipleship is an orientation to the guru, to Yogananda in this case. So every action and thought that I'm having, as much as is possible prior to or after, because sometimes our thoughts come out and we have to catch them afterward, I'm always trying to orient that back to my attunement to the guru. What is the guru asking me to do? And how can I share the guru's vibration in my life with the people that I'm encountering? And so much like the foundation of, let me finish that thought. The only way that I can think to describe it in the world, though I have not personally had this experience, I think about parenthood. And the moment that you become a parent, your orientation in life, for the most part, becomes about this little being that you're now in charge of raising and cultivating and helping to grow. And so all of the decisions and actions that you take in your life, this little being is in the back of your mind, hopefully, as you're raising that child. And that's how I feel being a disciple, that in the back of my mind, there's always the concept, how can I share this vibration of Yogananda and Swami Kriyananda? How can I share Ananda? And so, as we mentioned earlier, I ground much of my practice in the mediation space, in education for life. And the foundation of that is that every soul, every being is a soul on a journey, wherever they are, and running the gamut of that, on a journey home, back to a place of oneness in God. And my responsibility as a disciple and as a mentor to these students is to help them take whatever their next step is to uplift their consciousness. And it's the incremental steps along that way, but whatever we can do to shift that space. So if all they need is a space to be heard, or sometimes they just need a space to not be heard and a space to sit silently, I try and tune into whatever that student needs in the moment. I've had so many occasions where a student will come in so angry about whatever conflict he or she's involved in. And I can tell right away, and I'll say to them, I'm going to sit here on my computer for the next 7 minutes or so. You just be with yourself, and we'll sit silently, and that's all they need. And then they can take an exhalation, and I can feel and tune in and say, now you're ready to talk. But if I tried right away, it wouldn't have worked. So I'm trying to honor where the soul is.
Mm-hmm. That's really wonderful. Do you, have you ever been able to reference Yogananda directly in any of your conversations with any of the students?
It comes up in different ways. I have a little travel altar that one of the women within Ananda makes, and I keep that on my desk. So it has not only Yogananda, but all of the masters. And people will ask, students will come in and they'll say, who is that? And I'll say, oh, that's my spiritual teacher. And I have a quote from Yogananda on the wall, and people will reference it. I also, because I've taken a brahmacharini vow, which is a monastic vow within Ananda, I wear yellow every day. So eventually the students will start to comment on that, and they'll ask, what is yellow your favorite color? That's the way they always start. And it's always fun to say, not really, because then they want to know more, but I'll share with them. So I certainly do not hide where the sources of my power and my inspiration come from. Though I would never ask a student to participate in any of the spiritual practices. I just ask them to think about what it means to be inspired, what it means to be kind, what it means to be compassionate. And again, as we mentioned, because of what Yogananda has given us and the way that we can interpret these teachings, we get to speak about that directly.
So you're allowed to have that little travel altar visible in your office that doesn't violate the church-state separation, or has nobody ever asked about it?
No, I mean, no one has asked about it, but my administration has come in and out. We're very lucky being in Palo Alto that there is space for everyone to be who they are. I have coworkers who have just sleeves of tattoos up and down, and there are a lot of schools where you have to cover your tattoos if you don't, if you have them. And so there's a lot of freedom and space to be who you are in this area. And that translates.
What quote do you have from Master on the Wall? Of all the thousands of words, I have to ask, what words did you post?
Oh gosh, you're going to test me, and I don't know it right now. It was a
what's the sense of it? You don't have to give me, you don't have to repeat it verbatim.
It's the vibration of, if you want to be happy, no one and nothing in the world can make you unhappy. It's not that particular quote, but it's this idea that happiness is within us, and we have a choice.
And that would be obviously the really best thing. Did your professional life change after you became a disciple?
It did. You know, the two were woven together. I was only in my second year of teaching
I
when
see.
I became a disciple. But my path toward conflict mediation was absolutely, it was perfectly merged with my discipleship and this path. Um, I was in the middle of an administrative credentialing program, and which means that I could be an administrator if I wanted to. And my principal called me in, and he said, "I would like to offer you this position, which is working up in the front office and being the conflict mediator." And I originally turned him down because the one thing I realized in my admin program is that I didn't want to be an administrator; that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't my life. And he said, "Okay, well, think about it." And he came back a day later and he said, "You know, the reason I offered this position to you is because the woman who was doing it before, who was leaving the school, said she knows that you're involved with yoga and meditation, and it felt like a perfect fit for you to
Oh,
bring this
interesting.
vibration." And I knew that that was a sign from Yogananda, from Master, that this was my next step. And
Oh,
interestingly, I'm now in my sixth year in the position. I've held that position longer than any other teacher because it is a lot of energy. You have to come in with every single issue that is presented to you. It's of deep importance to the students who are in front of you. So even if they're fighting over, and this is a true story, I had two students fighting over a pencil and who owned the pencil. And it was deeply meaningful to them. And so my job was to be present with them and hear what was happening underneath.
mm, mm.
So.
But, this is peripheral to what you're saying, but Helen Purcell, who's the director of our K through 8 school, Ananda's Living Wisdom K through 8 school. There was this conversation about how much should you tell your children about the COVID epidemic.
Hmm.
The answer was so simple and wise. She said, find out what they know already or don't know already, and find out what they're afraid of.
Hmm.
She said, and tell them what they need to know, but mostly tell them what they need to know to help them overcome their fears. She said, so often the parents just start telling the children what they know in the name of honesty, and they often don't even know what the children are actually afraid of because the children's fears or don't necessarily show up from an adult perspective. So, have you had experiences where guidance comes to you spontaneously, intuition comes to you spontaneously, that you do you feel like Master's in the room with you sometimes?
I do, and often I invite him and ask him to be present. Especially, you know, I start each day. The first thing I do when I arrive at work is I have a Spotify playlist with all of Swami Kriyananda's instrumental music, and I turn it on, and it plays all day in that office, even when I have to leave to go teach the class. And you know, students will come in, and the first thing they'll say is, "Wow, why does it feel so good in here?" And I know it's because I've shared that space and opened it up to my gurus and my teachers, and that the music is playing. So I create that space where the intuition and the guidance are invited in. But yes, very often I'll ask Master to be present with me to help me to feel. Because again, everything we've been talking about, the anger is the superficial emotion that's often attached to a deeper need within each student. Anger manifests because there's a need not being met. So I'll often ask, you know, help me tune into what this student needs, the guidance that I can offer. And if it's bigger than my skill set allows, then I get to help guide them to the person who can help them. You know, maybe it's a need for where they're living or food or whatever it may be that they need. I can help guide them to where their next step is, to again to expand and to grow into the soul that they've incarnated to become, to learn the lessons they've come here to learn.
Do you think, let me think how to say this. Do you think this is something that you'll be doing for many years of your life? Does it feel like a karmic debt that you're paying, or does this really feel that you were born to help teenagers in this way?
That's an interesting question. It doesn't it does not feel that this is that I was born into this life to help teenagers. I understand them. I like them, and I enjoy this age group, and I enjoy being able to kind of crack at the surface a little bit, the harder exteriors. But I think this is a perfect. It was and continues to be, as long as Master keeps me in this role. Um, a perfect learning place to learn what it means to really help cultivate and nurture the soul's journey, so that I can take those steps and continue to do that in whatever way he asks me to serve in this life. So I don't feel the need to stay where I am with teenagers, but I do feel guided to be there for now.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Some people are born, that for this hour was I born. Some is a means to what's really, what you describe, both the work that you describe and the way that you do it really sound superb. So do you get up in the morning eager to go and serve in this way? It,
I
it,
do.
it makes you
Yeah.
very happy to be able to do that.
Yeah, I love the mediation job. I didn't know if I would. Like I said, I originally was hesitant to it, but I know that I'm helping my students, and I know how much Master is helping me, and I'm learning and growing through the experience, which is all we can ask for.
That's exactly what we want. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciated learning. I being taken into a world that I didn't know, and seeing it through your eyes. So thank you very much, Lakshmi. God
Thank
bless.
you.